Hey everyone, my name is Logan Long and this is my video project for my Fundamentals of Physics class, and my instructor for this class is Mr. J. Murphy. In this video I want to talk about kinetic energy and Newton's laws of motion and how they apply to the real world and video games. So here we go. So kinetic energy is energy of something or someone that is moving. So if we're moving at all, like I'm moving my hands or even my lips, we're all showing kinetic energy. As I'm speaking right now, still showing kinetic energy. So kinetic energy, like I said, it's just basically, if you're moving, you're showing kinetic energy. So that's that. And now I want to show you how this applies to using Newton's laws of motion. As a side note, keep in mind that without using kinetic energy, we can't use Newton's laws of motion. So Newton's first law of motion is the law of inertia, which states that an object in motion stays in motion, or an object at rest stays at rest, unless acted upon by an unbalanced force. And this applies to an object in motion or an object at rest. So here's an example of how this applies to the real world. So I'll be using the following example for each of Newton's laws, and each time I use that example, I want you to look at it from the viewpoint of the law I'm describing. So as you just saw, my foot was the object that stayed in motion until the mattress, being the unbalanced force, acted upon my foot, forcing it back to the floor. This is just a small example of how the law of inertia can be applied. And since it's Newton's first law of motion, let's take a look at his second law of motion, since we've looked at the first law pretty thoroughly. So Newton's second law of motion states that a force generated by an object or person is based on how much mass that person or object contains and how fast that person or object is accelerating towards another object or person in which to expel that force. So now, let's look at a real-world example of how Newton's second law is applied. So as you just saw, the mass and acceleration of my foot producing a force to the mattress didn't really do much because the mattress, well, it has enough springs in it to bounce my foot back. But that's also an example of friction, which is the opposite direction in which you're applying a force. And it's also an example of Newton's third law. So let's talk about that. So Newton's third law of motion states that an action performed on an object or person will trigger an equal and opposite reaction on that person or object you performed your action on. So now, I'd like to show you a real-world example of how Newton's third law is applied in the real world. So as you just saw, when I kicked the bed reacted by bouncing my foot back to the floor because of the springs built inside. So now you've seen real-world examples of all of Newton's laws, and now I want to show you some video game examples of how these laws can be applied. So as another side note, I will use the video game Resident Evil 6 as an example, and in the video, the player plays as the character Jake Mueller. So let's get started. To start off, Jake uses Newton's second law of motion to accelerate a force towards an enemy to prevent him from attacking, but enemies use Newton's third law to react to Jake's attack. But Jake uses Newton's third law to react to their attacks by counterattacking and dodging. Keep in mind that Newton's first law of motion, the law of inertia, is always followed, then broken, then followed again, then broken again, and so on, because Jake and his enemies are always moving, then either quickly stopping, or they are attacking each other. Jake can even use Newton's third law of motion to dodge bullets. Sadly, no attack is guaranteed, as Jake and his enemies keep disrupting each other's attacks, by gunfire and through physical force. So in the end, this proves that using real-world physics is very important in a lot of video games, and there's more physics to consider than what I discussed, but I don't have enough time to cover it all right now. So for now, I can just say thank you for watching my videos, and I hope you really learned from this and are inspired to make your own games. So again, thank you for watching.